Daniel Reeves saw her step off that elevator and he ran. Not walked, not turned away. Ran. He shoved his mop cart sideways, ducked through the service door, and pressed his back flat against the cold concrete wall of the maintenance corridor. Heart-slamming, jaw-locked, breath held like a man who believes sound alone can get him killed. On the other side of that wall was the most powerful woman in the building, and she was the one person on earth who could destroy the quiet little life he had spent 6 years building from nothing. He stood there in the dark in his gray janitor's uniform and made a decision. She will never see my face. He was wrong. Because in 48 hours, he would be sitting across from her at a candlelit table, not as her employee, as her blind date. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. Because what happens next in that restaurant will change everything. The fluorescent lights in the service corridor of Hartwell Financial hummed the same way they always did. Low indifferent, slightly too bright for 4:47 in the morning. Daniel Reeves had memorized that hum the same way he had memorized everything else about this building. The exact groan of the freight elevator. The 3 steps it took before the motion sensor on the 14th floor clicked on. The angle you had to hold the mop bucket so the left wheel wouldn't squeak against the tile near the executive conference room. Details, control, invisibility. That was his whole life now, and he had built it that way on purpose. He was 43 years old, black, 6 feet even, broad shoulders that used to fill a dress shirt and now filled a gray maintenance uniform with the name Reeves stitched above the breast pocket in faded blue thread. His hands were rough in a way they had never been before the other life, the one he didn't talk about. He wore no watch, no jewelry. He kept his face clean-shaved every morning because Lily said scruff made him look sad, and he would rather drag a razor across his face in a dark bathroom at 4 a.m. than give his daughter one more reason to worry about him. She worried enough already. She was 8 years old. She shouldn't have been worrying at all. Daniel pushed his cart through the east corridor of the 22nd floor, the executive level moving with the kind of practiced quiet that takes years to perfect. Not sneaking, not hiding, just invisible, which is a different thing entirely. He had learned the difference the hard way. He was wiping down the glass partition near the main conference room when he heard the elevator open behind him. He didn't turn around. Nobody came up to 22 before 7. That was the one thing he had counted on every single morning for the past 2 years. The executive floor was his floor in the dark hours before the world showed up. But the footsteps were deliberate. Heels on marble, measured and unhurried. The sound of someone who owned whatever room they walked into. He still didn't turn. Maintenance. A woman's voice. Sharp, controlled. Is this hallway always this dim at night, or is that a bulb issue? Motion sensors adjust at 5 a.m., Daniel said, keeping his back to her. Should be at full by the time the floor opens. A pause. And what time does the floor open? 7. I'm aware. I'm asking because I intend to be here at 6. He finally turned, because not turning would have been more noticeable than turning. He kept his face flat, professional, the expression of a man who has perfected the art of being present without being seen. And then he saw her. She was standing at the end of the hallway with a leather portfolio under one arm and a coffee she had clearly brought from outside because she didn't trust the building's machine yet. Mid-40s maybe. Dark suit. Hair pulled back with the kind of precision that said she had made a decision about every single detail of how she appeared in the world and had not wavered from it since. Her eyes were calm and direct, and they moved over him the way intelligent people's eyes move over everything, cataloging, categorizing, filing. He said nothing for 2 full seconds. She said nothing either. Then she nodded once and walked toward the corner office, the one that had been empty for 4 months since the previous CEO had been pushed out. She used a keycard he had never seen before. The door opened. She walked in without looking back. Daniel stood there for exactly 3 more seconds. Then he turned his cart around, went back to the freight elevator, and rode it down to the basement, where he sat on an overturned crate and pressed both hands flat against his knees until they stopped shaking. Her name was Evelyn Hart. He had not seen her face in 11 years, but he had never once forgotten it. His co-worker Raymond found him in the break room at 6:15, staring at a cup of coffee he hadn't drunk. Raymond was 61, stocky, with a knee that had never healed right from a fall on the job 12 years ago. He walked with a slight drag on the left side, and he had been at Hartwell longer than anyone on the maintenance crew, long enough to remember when the executive bathroom still had a chandelier. He dropped into the chair across from Daniel and looked at him. "You look like you saw something," Raymond said. "New CEO's already here." Raymond raised both eyebrows. "It's not even 7. "I know." "Who is she?" Daniel picked up his coffee. "Put it back down." "Don't know." He had always been a careful liar. Not cruel, not habitual. Just careful the way a man is careful when the truth costs more than he can pay. Raymond watched him for a moment longer than comfortable, and then let it go the way men their age learn to let things go. "Anyway," Raymond said, leaning back. "Speaking of women." Daniel looked up. "Don't." "I didn't say anything yet." "You had the voice. You had the set-up voice." "I'm just saying my wife's friend, Raymond, and has been single for 2 years. She's smart, she's got her head on straight, and Patricia just wants to do one dinner." Raymond held both hands up. "One dinner. That's it. You eat food. You talk to a human being. You remember what it's like to have a conversation that doesn't start with Dad. Can I have screen time?" Daniel pressed his mouth flat. He hated that Raymond always landed the jokes that were also the truth. "I'm not looking for anything," Daniel said. "Nobody ever is," Raymond said and stood up, dragging his left leg a little as he turned toward the door. "That's usually when they find it." He got home at 7:40 a.m. Lily was already up. She was always already up because she had his internal clock, which meant she woke like a soldier and went to sleep like she was fighting it. She was at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal and a library book about deep-sea fish that she had already read twice. She looked up when he came in. "You look tired," she said. "Good morning to you too." "I'm serious. You look like you saw something." He stopped in the kitchen doorway and stared at his 8-year-old daughter, who had apparently inherited his wife's ability to read a room with a single glance. "I'm fine," he said. "Eat your breakfast." "I am eating my breakfast." She pointed at the bowl. Simultaneously. He almost smiled. Almost. He made himself a second cup of coffee. The real one, the one he could taste, and leaned against the counter, while Lily read about anglerfish, and the morning moved around them in the way their mornings did, quietly, carefully, without surprises. He had built that. The no-surprises life. 2 years in this apartment. Same job, same schedule. Same 3 routes from the parking lot to the front door because he always walked the one with the cameras if he was carrying something, the one without if he wasn't. Old habits. They didn't turn off. "Dad," Lily said without looking up from the book. "Yeah." Raymond's wife called again. He set down his coffee. "She called here. She called your cell. You left it on the table last night." Now she looked up. "She said it's just dinner. She said you would say no and to tell you that she's saying it anyway." Daniel looked at the ceiling. "She also said," Lily was reading from the little notepad she'd written on very precisely, in her careful 3rd-grade print, "that the woman is kind, thoughtful, and you will like her if you give yourself permission." "You wrote that down." "I wrote it down," Lily confirmed, completely unapologetic. He looked at her for a long moment, this small, serious person, who had his forehead and her mother's eyes, and a way of sitting still in a room that made her seem twice her age. 8 years old, and she had already been through more losses than some people carry in a lifetime, and she was still here, still reading about fish, still writing things down in case he forgot. "I'll think about it," he said. "That means no. It means I'll think about it." She went back to the book. "Dad." "What?" She didn't look up. "You're allowed to have something." He stood there in his kitchen for a full 10 seconds without saying anything. Then he picked up his coffee and went to get ready for bed. He said yes to the dinner. He told himself it was because Raymond had asked 3 separate times that week, and because Patricia had called twice, and because Lily had left the notepad on the bathroom counter with, "She said she's kind," underlined twice in pencil. He did not tell himself the other reason, the one he wasn't ready to name, that seeing Evelyn Hart's face in that hallway had broken something open in him, some sealed room he thought he'd bricked up tight, and he was now desperately trying to fill the space with something ordinary so the walls would hold. He picked a Saturday. He chose the time. He told himself 1 meal, polite conversation, an hour, maybe less. He would be kind but not open, present but not available. He had perfected that balance years ago. The restaurant was called the Sterling Room, a private dining place in Midtown that Raymond's wife had chosen, which meant it was quieter than he would have liked, more intimate than he had prepared for. The kind of place with low lighting and linen napkins and booths, with enough space between them that you could speak honestly without being overheard. He arrived 6 minutes early because he always arrived early to any room he was walking into for the first time. He needed to know the exits. He needed to see the space before it filled with variables he couldn't control. The host said the table was already reserved, that his guest had already arrived. He followed the man through the restaurant, adjusting the collar of the one good shirt he owned, dark navy pressed, because Lily had checked it twice before he left, and told him he looked nice, in a voice that meant, "Please go, please try." The private dining room was at the back. A frosted glass door partially open, warm light spilling through. He pushed it open and stopped. And the woman sitting at the table had a glass of water in front of her and a leather portfolio that he recognized not from tonight, not from this room, but from a corridor on the 22nd floor at 4:47 in the morning. She looked up. Evelyn Hart looked directly at him and did not flinch, did not look surprised, did not look away. Because she already knew. He understood in that single second before either of them spoke that she had known exactly who was coming through that door. Daniel Reeves stood in the entrance of that room in his one good shirt and felt the entire structure of his invisible life shift beneath him like ground before an earthquake, not breaking yet, but no longer still. "Mr. Reeves," Evelyn said, and her voice was exactly the same as it had been 11 years ago. Precise, unreadable, and somehow both colder and calmer than anything the room deserved. He did not run. He didn't know yet if that was courage, or if he had simply run out of places to go. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. The Monday after the blind date that never happened, Daniel came in at 4:30 instead of 4:47, 17 minutes earlier. That was the calculation he had made lying awake at 2 a.m. while Lily slept in the next room and the ceiling fan turned slow circles above his head. 17 minutes gave him enough time to finish the 22nd floor and be back in the service corridor before Evelyn Hart arrived. Because she had said 6. And he had believed her because a woman like that did not say things she didn't mean. He moved faster that morning, tighter routes. No lingering near the windows the way he sometimes did when the city was still dark and quiet, and felt briefly like it belonged to nobody. He finished the executive floor in 41 minutes. A personal record. He was back in the elevator cart, loaded heading down, when the doors opened on 22, and Evelyn Hart stepped in. She was carrying the same leather portfolio, the same outside coffee. She was wearing charcoal gray today instead of black, and her eyes moved to him with the same calm directness as before. No surprise, no adjustment, just recognition, immediate and complete. The elevator doors closed. Neither of them spoke for 4 full seconds. "You changed your schedule," she said. It wasn't a question. "Trying to get ahead of the week," Daniel said. She looked at him a moment longer than the answer required. Then she looked forward at the elevator doors. "The motion sensor on the 14th floor," she said. "It has a half-second delay, longer than the others." He kept his face still. "I'll put in a service ticket." "I'd appreciate it." The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened, She walked out without another word, heels precise on the marble, and Daniel stood inside the elevator with his cart until the doors closed again, and he was alone. He let out a breath that had been sitting in his chest since the doors opened on 22. She hadn't said his name. She hadn't said anything that meant anything. But she knew he had changed his schedule. She had noticed the 17 minutes. And she had told him so, not as an accusation, just as information calmly delivered, which was somehow worse. He rode back to the basement and sat on the overturned crate and thought about what it meant when a woman like Evelyn Hart let you know she was paying attention. Nothing good. That was what it meant. Raymond was waiting for him at the time clock, arms folded, wearing the expression of a man who has been rehearsing a conversation. "She didn't show," Raymond said. "Drop it." Patricia said the woman waited 40 minutes. Daniel punched his card. "I had something come up with Lily. Lily was at Patricia's cousin's house for the night. I know, because Patricia arranged it specifically so you wouldn't have an excuse." Raymond stepped closer and dropped his voice. "What happened, Daniel?" "Nothing happened. I couldn't make it." "You couldn't make it?" Raymond repeated, flat and disbelieving. "A dinner. One dinner. Couldn't make it. Ray. She's a real person. Patricia's friend. She sat there for 40 minutes. Daniel turned to face him, and something in his expression made Raymond go quiet, not because it was angry, but because it wasn't. It was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the early morning shift. "I know she's a real person," Daniel said. "I'm sorry. Tell Patricia I'm sorry. Tell her friend I'm sorry. But I can't explain it right now, and I need you to trust me, that it wasn't nothing." Raymond looked at him for a long moment. The break room hummed around them. Somewhere down the hall, a cart was rolling across tile. "All right," Raymond said finally. "All right, but Daniel—" He waited until Daniel met his eyes. "Whatever it is you're carrying around, it's getting heavier. I can see it on you." Daniel picked up his bag. "I'm fine." "You've been saying that for 2 years. Fine is not a feeling. Fine is what you say when you don't trust the person asking." Daniel didn't answer that because Raymond was right, and they both knew it, and there was nothing useful he could say. He drove home in the dark, the city moving past his windows like something that belonged to other people. The next 3 days he was a ghost. He rerouted his entire morning schedule, something he'd never done in 2 years, to keep himself on the floors. Evelyn Hart had no reason to visit. He stayed on 12 on 8 on the basement corridors. He filed the service ticket for the 14th floor sensor remotely, so he'd never have to go up and fix it himself. He sent his colleague Marcus, the new guy, 24 years old, and thrilled to be sent anywhere to handle anything on 22. It was working. He almost believed it. Then on Thursday, Marcus came back from 22 with a folded note and held it out like it might bite him. "Lady in the corner office asked me to give this to the regular maintenance guy," Marcus said. "Said she didn't want to put it in the system." Daniel took the note, unfolded it. It said, "The bulb in the east corridor is still dim. E.H." That was all. No threat, no demand. A 5-word note about a light bulb. But it was written in the precise, unhurried handwriting of someone who knew exactly what they were doing, and the initials at the bottom weren't an accident. E.H. She was telling him she knew it was him avoiding her. And she was telling him it didn't matter. She would wait. He replaced the bulb himself the next morning at 4:30 and was gone before 6. He didn't see her. He didn't know whether that was relief or disappointment, and that uncertainty bothered him more than either answer would have. Saturday came around the way Saturdays did, slower than the weekdays, softer at the edges. Lily had a reading group at the library until noon, which meant Daniel had 4 hours that were technically his, a concept he had never fully figured out what to do with. He was at the kitchen table with coffee and the utility bill when his phone buzzed. Patricia's number. He stared at it for 2 rings. Then he picked up. "Before you hang up," Patricia said with the voice of a woman who had rehearsed this too, "just listen. 60 seconds. Then you can do whatever you want." "I'm not hanging up," he said. "She's not angry. That's the first thing. She understands something came up, although, between you and me, Daniel, she didn't look fine when I talked to her. She looked like a woman who made herself be fine, which is different." He said nothing. "She asked if you'd be willing to try again," Patricia continued. "She said she'd leave it entirely up to you. No pressure, no explanation required, just if you want to, she'd like to." Daniel set down his coffee, pressed his thumb against the edge of the table. "Patricia, I can't tell you why I canceled. I want you to know it wasn't about her. It wasn't about the dinner. It was something I—" He stopped, started again. "There are things in my past I've spent a long time keeping separate from my life now. And this got close to something I can't afford to open." A long pause. Then Patricia said quietly, "Daniel, it's been 6 years." "I know. She's been gone 6 years, and you've been—" Another pause. "You've been maintaining. You've been surviving. But baby, that's not the same thing as living." He didn't trust his voice for a moment. When it came back, it was steadier than he felt. "I know the difference." "Then act like it." She let that sit. Then softer. "One more dinner. Different place, your choice. You don't owe her anything. You don't owe me anything. But you owe that man in the mirror at least one honest try." He closed his eyes. Lily came home at noon with 3 library books and a friendship bracelet she had made in the craft section. She handed it to him, immediately. Blue and green, slightly lopsided, absolutely perfect. "For you," she said. "Because blue is your favorite, and I used extra green because the lady at the table next to me said green means new beginnings, and I thought that seemed like something you needed." He put it on his wrist without a word. Lily watched him with her mother's eyes, patient and steady, and seeing straight through whatever face he was making. "Are you going on the dinner?" she asked. "Who told you about the dinner?" "You wrote the restaurant name on the notepad. I looked it up. It has 4 stars. He looked at his daughter, this 8-year-old person who was simultaneously the best thing in his life and the most exhausting. And he thought about what Patricia had said, maintaining versus living. And he thought about Evelyn Hart writing a 5-word note about a light bulb and signing it with her initials like she had all the time in the world. "Yeah," he said. "I'm going." Lily nodded once, satisfied, and opened her library book. "Good," she said. "You should wear the blue shirt." He didn't ask how she knew about the blue shirt. He called Patricia back that afternoon and said yes. Different restaurant. His choice. Thursday evening. He picked a place in a neighborhood Evelyn Hart would have no reason to frequent in her professional life. A small American spot booths, no dress code. The kind of place where the noise from other tables gave you somewhere to look when the silence got too heavy. He told himself he was going because it was the right thing to do. Because he owed it to Patricia, who had been quietly kind to him for 2 years. Because Lily had left the library bracelet on the kitchen counter, where he'd see it every morning. He did not let himself think about the corner office on the 22nd floor. He did not let himself think about the handwriting on that note. He did not think about the way Evelyn Hart had stood in that elevator and said you changed your schedule without blinking. He was going to a dinner with a stranger. A different woman. Someone who had nothing to do with his past, his old life, the man he used to be. He repeated that to himself 3 times. Thursday evening, he parked 2 blocks from the restaurant. He walked the long way, old habit, not paranoia, he told himself, and maybe believed it a little less than he used to. He straightened his collar in the reflection of a storefront window. He was wearing the blue shirt. He pushed open the door of the restaurant and told the host his name. "Of course," the host said. "Your guest is already here." Of course she is, he thought. He had arrived 7 minutes early. He followed the host through the restaurant, past the bar, past the regular tables toward the back booth he had specifically requested for privacy. He turned the corner and stopped breathing. Evelyn Hart was sitting in his booth, not in her CEO clothes, not with her portfolio. She was wearing a dark green blouse, hair down for the first time he had ever seen it, and she had both hands around a glass of water, and she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't name. Not triumphant, not apologetic, not cold. She looked almost tired. like a woman who had also spent a very long week doing something difficult and had arrived here because she couldn't think of anything else to do. He stood there at the edge of the booth, and the restaurant noise moved around them like water around two stones, and neither of them said anything for what felt like a very long time. Then Evelyn Hart set down her glass and said, "I didn't arrange this. I want you to know that." "Then what are you doing here?" "Patricia is my college roommate's younger sister." A beat. "I didn't know it was you until I sat down the first time. By then you were already gone." He absorbed that, filed it. "And tonight, I asked if I could try again." Her eyes held steady on his. "You can leave. I won't follow you. I won't make anything difficult for you at work." "That's not—" She stopped, pressed her lips together briefly. "That is not who I am. Whatever you think of me." Daniel looked at this woman, this precise, powerful, exhausting woman, sitting in a restaurant booth in a green blouse with her hair down and her hands wrapped around a water glass like it was the one steady thing in the room. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "5 minutes," he said. "Then I decide." She nodded. "That's fair." The waiter appeared. Daniel ordered coffee. Evelyn didn't order anything new, just waited, and when the waiter left, she looked at him and said simply and directly, the way she said everything, "I know who you are, Daniel. Not just your name. I know what you did. And I know what was done to you." The coffee shop noise around them suddenly felt very far away. "Then you know," he said carefully, "why I've spent 2 years making sure nobody knows who I am." "Yes," she said. "And you came anyway?" "Yes." He studied her face, looking for the angle, the calculation, the play. He was good at finding those things. He had spent 11 years being good at it. He couldn't find one. "Why?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment. And then Evelyn Hart, CEO of Hartwell Financial. A woman who had never in his experience said a single unnecessary word, said something he had not prepared for. Because someone should have said something a long time ago. And I didn't. And I've been carrying that. The booth held that sentence. Daniel wrapped both hands around his coffee cup, and outside the restaurant, the city moved on without them. And he sat with the strange, unsettling feeling of a man who has been running in one direction for 6 years. And has just discovered the ground in front of him is not what he thought it was. He didn't leave after 5 minutes. He stayed. He stayed for 2 hours. He had not planned to. He had planned 5 minutes a polite exit and the long drive home where he could decompress in the dark and tell himself he had done the decent thing. But 2 hours passed the way certain conversations pass, not quickly, not easily, but with the particular weight of things that have needed to be said for a very long time, finally finding air. Evelyn had not pushed. That was the first thing he noticed, and it recalibrated something in him. She was not a woman who filled silence with noise. She let the quiet sit between sentences without reaching for it, and in his experience, that was rarer than people understood. Most people couldn't stand the quiet. They filled it with performance. She didn't. She had ordered food somewhere in the first hour, not asking him if that was all right, just flagging the waiter with a small gesture the way people do when they're not thinking about whether they belong somewhere. He had ordered too without deciding to, because the conversation had kept moving, and the stopping point he'd been looking for never arrived. "You were at Meridian," she said. Not a question, a placement. Not as a contractor. You were on the inside response team. "For 8 months," he said. "The Callaway breach." He looked at her steadily. "You have a good memory." "I have good records," she said. "I went back through the incident files after I saw your face in that corridor. It took me 3 days to access the archived reports. Most of them had been reclassified." She paused. "But not all of them." He said nothing. "The breach was contained in 72 hours. Evelyn continued. "The report credited a man named Warren Pulse, Senior Director of Infrastructure. He gave the press conference. He received the commendation." She watched Daniel's face. But the technical log told a different story. The timestamps, the access signatures, The patch architecture. Someone else built that solution. Someone who was never mentioned by name. People get left out of reports, Daniel said, and even he could hear how flat it sounded. Not like that, she said. Not deliberately. Not with that level of specificity. She leaned forward slightly. You were removed from the report entirely. Not just uncredited. Erased. And 3 months later you were terminated for an unrelated code of conduct violation that I cannot find a single piece of supporting documentation for. The restaurant noise moved around them. Daniel turned his coffee cup a quarter turn clockwise, then back. It was a long time ago, he said. It was 11 years ago, she said. And you went from being one of the most capable incident engineers in the region to cleaning floors at 5 in the morning. So no. It was not a long time ago. It is still happening, every single day. He looked up at her, then really looked the kind of looking he usually kept pointed away from people. Why does it matter to you? He asked. You run a financial firm. That breach was at a tech company that doesn't even exist anymore. You had nothing to do with it. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. She straightened the edge of her napkin without looking at it. I knew Warren Pulse, she said. Not well. But I was at the Meridian board meeting where they decided how to handle the public narrative around the breach. I was a junior consultant. I sat in the room. She met his eyes. I didn't know what they were doing to you specifically, but I knew the decision they made was about protecting someone and burying someone else, and I said nothing. The table held that. You were a junior consultant, Daniel said carefully. I was an adult with a voice, she said. Those are not the same thing as powerless. He studied her face. The steadiness in it. The particular kind of stillness that comes not from peace, but from a person who has argued with themselves about something many times and arrived at the same uncomfortable conclusion every time. He believed her. That was the thing that unsettled him. He believed her, and he hadn't genuinely believed anything a person in authority said to him in 11 years. There was a woman, he said, and stopped. He hadn't said those words to anyone outside of Raymond's orbit in 6 years. He wasn't sure he had said them out loud at all. Evelyn waited. My wife, he said. Her name was Claire. She got sick not suddenly, the way you hope for, so the shock takes some of the weight. The slow kind. The kind that takes about 2 years and costs everything you have and then some. He turned the coffee cup again. I was in the middle of the Callaway response when she got her diagnosis. I kept working. I had to. We needed the insurance. We needed the income. Lily was 2 years old. Evelyn was completely still. The solution I built for Callaway, I worked 36-hour stretches. I was running on nothing. I made it work, and then I went home and I sat next to Claire in a hospital chair and I held her hand, and then I drove back and I kept working. His voice stayed level. He had long ago learned to tell this story without letting it break him, because if it broke him, he couldn't finish it. When Pulse took the credit, I knew. I knew immediately. But I also knew that fighting it would cost me the job. And losing the job meant losing the insurance. And losing the insurance meant losing Claire, Evelyn said quietly. Meant losing Claire faster, he said. And losing everything we had left for Lily. He picked up his coffee, drank, set it back down. So I let it go. I signed what they asked me to sign. I stayed quiet. I kept my insurance for 14 more months until Claire passed, and then they terminated me anyway. Clean, efficient. The conduct violation was something they'd been saving a documentation error from 6 months earlier that meant nothing, and that they made mean everything when it was useful. The words sat on the table between them like something physical. You let them take it, Evelyn said, because the alternative cost too much. I let them take it, he said. Yes. She looked at him for a long moment, and he watched something move through her expression, not pity, which he would have stood up and left over, but something that looked like anger on his behalf, which was different enough that he stayed in his seat. Where is Pulse now? She asked. I don't know. I stopped looking. I know where he is, she said simply. He's on the board of a subsidiary that Hartwell Financial acquired 14 months ago. The restaurant went very quiet in Daniel's ears. "That's why you came to Hartwell," he said slowly. "I came to Hartwell because it was the right opportunity at the right time," she said. "But when I found you in that corridor and went back through the records and found Pulse's name on my own board," she stopped, let out a breath that was the most human thing he had seen her do all evening. "That is not a coincidence I was willing to walk past." He sat back. He looked at the ceiling briefly, then at the table, then at her. "What are you planning to do?" he asked. "That depends," she said, "on what you want." "I don't want anything from him," Daniel said, and the speed of it surprised even him. This isn't about revenge. I stopped wanting revenge a long time ago. You can't raise a child and carry that much anger at the same time. Something has to go." "It's not about revenge," she said. "It's about the record, your professional record. It's wrong. It has been wrong for 11 years, and it has cost you work you should have been offered and opportunities you should have had and—" she paused. "And a life that should have looked different from the one you've had to build on your hands and knees." He felt something shift in his chest. Not dramatically, not the way it happens in stories, but the quiet internal movement of a weight that has been in one position so long, you forgot it wasn't attached. "I built a good life," he said, and he meant it. "I know you did," she said. "That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you built it starting from a hole someone else dug for you, and you did it anyway, and that should not erase the fact that the hole was wrong." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're very direct," he said. "I've been told," she said, and the corner of her mouth moved, not quite a smile, but the shape of one brief and real, and so unexpected that it landed somewhere it probably shouldn't have. He paid the check before she could, not out of pride, but out of the need to do one thing in this conversation from his own pocket on his own terms. She let him, which surprised him. He had expected an argument. They walked out into the night air together and stood on the sidewalk with 2 feet of space between them and the sound of the city moving in every direction. "I need to think," he said. "Of course. Not about I believe you. That's not the issue." He pushed his hands into his jacket pockets. "I've spent a long time making sure my past stayed separate from Lily's life, from her stability. If this gets complicated, I will not move on anything without your knowledge," Evelyn said. "And nothing I do will touch your position at Hartwell. That is separate. That is already separate. You have my word." He looked at her, this woman who had walked into his building and his corridor and his careful, invisible life, and he made the kind of judgment call he used to make at speed. In crisis rooms, trust or don't trust, act or don't act in the next 5 seconds before the window closes. "All right," he said. She nodded once. "I'll call a car," she said, pulling out her phone. "You don't have a driver?" "Not at night. Off the clock, I handle myself." She glanced up briefly. "It's important to remember how." He stood there a moment longer. Then he said, before he could decide not to, "Her name was Claire. I don't say that to many people, but you should know who you're doing this for. It's not for me. Not entirely." She never got to see it corrected. Evelyn looked at him steadily. "Then we'll correct it for both of you." He walked to his car. He drove 2 blocks before he had to pull over and just sit for a minute with his hands on the wheel and the engine running and the city lights smearing soft across the windshield. He wasn't angry. He wasn't relieved. He was something he didn't have a clean word for, the feeling of a door opening in a house you'd stopped believing had any rooms left. He sat there for 4 minutes. Then he drove home. Lily was asleep. He checked on her the way he always did, stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, long enough to hear her breathing slow and steady in the dark. Her library bracelet twin was on the nightstand. She had made one for herself too, same colors, different pattern. He went to the kitchen. He stood at the counter and looked at the friendship bracelet on his own wrist, blue and green, slightly lopsided, and he thought about what Evelyn had said. The record is wrong. It has been wrong for 11 years. He thought about Claire, who had squeezed his hand in the hospital and told him near the end that she needed him to stop being so careful with himself, that she needed him to promise he would eventually stop surviving and start living. He had said yes the way you say yes to dying people, meaning it, and not knowing if it was true. 6 years later, standing in his kitchen at 11 at night with a coffee cup he'd forgotten to fill, he thought that maybe the moment she had asked him to find was starting to look like something. Not romance. Not rescue. Nothing that simple. Just a door. Just a room. Just the particular terrifying possibility that the story he had been telling himself that everything good was behind him was not the only story available. His phone buzzed on the counter. A text from an unknown number. The light in the east corridor is fine now, by the way. E.H. He stared at it for a long moment. Then, for the first time in longer than he could accurately remember, Daniel Reeves smiled at his phone in the dark of his own kitchen. He didn't text back. But he smiled. He didn't text back that night. But the next morning at 4:47, his original time, not the adjusted one, he was back on the 22nd floor. He didn't decide it consciously. He just drove to work and rode the elevator to 22 the way he always had before the running started, and he pushed his cart through the east corridor and replaced a soap dispenser in the executive bathroom and wiped down the glass partition near the conference room. And when the elevator opened at 5:58 and Evelyn Hart walked out with her outside coffee and her leather portfolio, he didn't disappear into the service corridor. He nodded. She nodded back. That was all. She went to her office. He finished the corridor. But something had shifted in the architecture of the morning, some small structural thing that wouldn't have been visible to anyone watching, but that both of them felt the way you feel a change in air pressure before weather arrives. Raymond noticed at the time clock. "You're back on 22, Raymond said. "I was always on 22. You were on 8 for a week and a half. 8 needed attention." Raymond looked at him with the patient skepticism of a man who has known Daniel Reeves long enough to understand that the truth arrives sideways, or not at all. "How was Thursday?" Daniel punched his card. "Fine. Fine," Raymond repeated. "That's it. Just fine." "It was a good dinner." Raymond stared at him. "A good dinner? You went on a blind date and came back with a good dinner." "What do you want me to say, Ray?" "I want you to say something that sounds like a human being had an experience." Raymond threw his hands up briefly. "Patricia has been texting me since Friday. She wants to know if there's going to be a second." "Tell her I'll handle it myself," Daniel said. "Tell her thank you, but I'll handle it." Raymond went quiet at that because "I'll handle it myself" was not a thing Daniel Reeves said about anything involving other people. He managed things. He navigated things. He did not handle things that required reaching toward someone else. "All right," Raymond said slowly. "All right then." The week moved forward, the way weeks do when something beneath the surface is changing, ordinary on top, complicated underneath. Daniel worked his shifts. He picked Lily up from school on Tuesday and Wednesday. He helped her with a book report on Wednesday night that turned into an hour-long conversation about whether fish experienced loneliness, which Lily believed they did, and argued with specific evidence from her library books, and which Daniel found himself genuinely uncertain about, which made her very satisfied. He did not contact Evelyn. On Friday morning, she was waiting near the elevator when he arrived on 22, not positioned strategically just there, coffee in hand, apparently having come out of her office for a reason that had nothing to do with him, but had resulted in them occupying the same 8 feet of corridor. "I started the records request," she said without preamble, "formally, through Hartwell's legal compliance office." He stopped his cart. "You moved fast. I told you I would move on it." "I thought you'd give me more time to." "The request is internal," she said. "It's not public. It's not connected to your name yet. I am reviewing the acquisition documents for the Pulse subsidiary as part of standard executive due diligence. That's all it is at this stage." She looked at him directly. "No one will know what I'm looking for until I decide to tell them." He absorbed that. "You're being careful." "I'm always careful," she said. "But yes, specifically careful in this case." He looked at her for a moment, This woman who had walked into his life like a controlled demolition, precise and deliberate, taking down exactly what she intended and nothing else. "Evelyn," he said. It was the first time he had used her name. He watched her register it just slightly. "If this goes somewhere, if you find what you think you'll find, what happens to Pulse? That depends on what the documents show," she said. "At minimum, his position on the subsidiary board becomes untenable. A man who falsified incident records and engineered a wrongful termination cannot sit on a board I'm responsible for. That's not justice. That's just governance. And at maximum," she was quiet for a moment. "At maximum, the original incident report gets formally corrected through the Meridian archive, which still exists absorbed into a larger firm's records. Your name goes back where it belongs. His commendation gets reviewed." She paused. "And 11 years of professional history that has been working against you stops working against you." He stood with that. The cart handle was solid under his hands, real physical, the weight of the present moment. "I never wanted his commendation taken away," Daniel said. "I want you to understand that. I don't need him to lose something. I needed it to not have cost what it cost." "I understand that," she said. "But Daniel." She said his name the same way he had said hers, deliberately, with the full weight of intention behind it. "What was done to you was not a miscommunication. It was a decision made by people who understood exactly what they were taking from you. Letting that stand isn't peace, it's just silence." He didn't answer immediately. Down the corridor, the motion sensor on 14 clicked on right on schedule. No longer delayed the bulb. He had replaced, doing exactly what it was supposed to do. "I'll let you work," she said, and moved back toward her office. "Evelyn." She stopped. He said, "Thank you. For the record request, even if nothing comes of it." She looked at him over her shoulder. "Something will come of it." She went into her office. He pushed his cart toward the east corridor and worked the rest of the floor in the quiet early morning, and he thought about Claire, about the specific conversation they had had 3 weeks before the end, when Claire had held his hand and said with the clarity that sometimes arrives in final weeks, "Daniel, promise me you won't let them keep it. Whatever they took. Promise me you'll find a way back to it." He had said yes. He always said yes to Claire. He had not until this week had any idea what yes looked like in practice. The call came on a Tuesday, 2.5 weeks later. He was in the basement break room eating a sandwich when his phone rang, a number he didn't recognize, area code he didn't know. He almost let it go to voicemail. Then something made him pick up. "Mr. Reeves," a man's voice, professional, measured. "My name is Gerald Okafor. I'm with Hartwell Financial's Legal Compliance Office. I'm calling because Ms. Hart has asked me to reach out to you directly regarding a records matter. Do you have a moment?" Daniel set down his sandwich. "Yes," he said. "I have a moment." Gerald Okafor was thorough and careful, and spoke in the precise language of legal professionals, which Daniel had once been fluent in, and now had to reattune himself to, like a frequency he'd been away from too long. The summary, stripped of its formal architecture, was this. Hartwell's review of the Pulse subsidiary acquisition had flagged significant discrepancies in the original Meridian incident documentation. The discrepancies were substantial enough to warrant formal referral. The referral had been made to the firm that now held Meridian's archived records. A correction process had been initiated. "What does that mean specifically?" Daniel asked. "It means," Gerald said carefully, "that the incident report for the Callaway breach is being formally amended. The technical attribution is being corrected based on access logs, timestamp records, and patch documentation that was not included in the original public report." A pause. "Your name will be reflected accurately in the amended record, Mr. Reeves. The work you did will be attributed to you." Daniel was quiet for a long time. "And Pulse?" he asked. "That's a separate matter, and I can't speak to its current status," Gerald said. "But I can tell you that his position on the subsidiary board is under review." He thanked Gerald Okafor and ended the call and sat in the basement break room with his sandwich and his phone, and the particular silence of a man who has just been handed something he stopped believing would ever arrive. He didn't cry. He wasn't sure what he did exactly, something that was not quite crying and not quite stillness. He sat there for 11 minutes by the clock on the wall and let it be real slowly, the way you let your eyes adjust to a room after coming in from very bright light. Then he picked up his phone and sent one text. To Evelyn, Gerald Okafor called. 3 minutes later, I know. I asked him to call you directly. I thought you deserved to hear it from a person, not a document. He stared at that. Then, you didn't have to do any of this. Her response took longer this time, long enough that he thought maybe the conversation was finished. Then I sat in that room 11 years ago and said nothing. I did have to do this. I just needed to find you first. He read that twice. Then he put his phone in his pocket and finished his sandwich because he had 40 minutes left on his break and he was suddenly, unexpectedly, completely starving. He told Raymond that afternoon, not everything but enough. He told him that something from his old career had been corrected, that a wrong thing was being made right. He watched Raymond's face move through confusion into understanding, into something warm and furious on his behalf. Someone actually fixed it, Raymond said. Someone actually fixed it. Raymond was quiet for a moment. Then he said, the CEO. Daniel said nothing. It was the CEO, Raymond said, not asking. The one you've been... He stopped himself, recalibrated. Daniel. Ray? I have been working next to you for 2 years, Raymond said, pointing at him. 2 years, and you have been carrying that the entire time. I've been fine. You've been surviving, Raymond said with an emphasis that meant he had heard that word somewhere recently and it had stuck. There's a difference. He shook his head slowly. What are you going to do now? Daniel thought about it honestly, which was something he had not let himself do with this question in a very long time. I don't know yet, he said. But I think for the first time in a while the answer isn't just keep going. Raymond nodded, looked at the floor, then looked back up. She know about Lily? Not really. She knows I have a daughter. You should tell her. The real version. Raymond put a hand briefly on Daniel's shoulder, a rare thing from a man who expressed care mostly through proximity and silence. A woman who does what she did, she deserves the real version. Daniel thought about that on the drive home. He thought about it while he made dinner pasta, the easy kind, Lily's favorite. And while Lily sat at the kitchen table doing homework and occasionally narrating facts about bioluminescent organisms that she had apparently transitioned to from deep-sea fish. Dad, Lily said at some point between fractions and the water cycle. Yeah. You're humming. He stopped. He hadn't realized he was humming. He didn't even know what he was humming. Sorry, he said. Don't be sorry. She looked up from her worksheet. You never hum. I like it. She studied him with her mother's eyes, that straight, patient look that saw through surfaces without trying. Did something good happen? He thought about Gerald Okafor's voice on the phone, about Evelyn's text, I needed to find you first, about the amended record with his name in it sitting somewhere in a legal archive, finally telling the truth about a 72-hour stretch 11 years ago when he had run on nothing and built something remarkable and then watched someone else claim it so his dying wife could keep her insurance. Yeah, baby, he said. Something good happened. Lily considered this with the seriousness she brought to important information. Then she went back to her worksheet. Good, she said simply. It was time. He served the pasta. They ate. Lily talked about bioluminescence and why anglerfish were misunderstood, and whether they could get a fish tank, which was a conversation they'd had before and would have again. He listened and asked questions and ate his dinner, and the kitchen was warm and the evening was ordinary. And underneath the ordinary, something that had been broken for a very long time was quietly, without drama, without announcement, beginning to knit itself back together. After Lily went to bed, he stood at the kitchen counter and opened his phone. He typed, Lily asked if something good happened today. I said yes. He sent it before he could rethink the decision. Evelyn's reply came 4 minutes later. How old is she? 8, he typed. She argues about fish with the confidence of a federal judge. A pause. Then she sounds like someone worth meeting. He stood in his kitchen for a long time looking at those 6 words. Then he typed back, maybe she is, and somewhere across the city in a corner office or an apartment. He didn't know the address of Evelyn Hart read that, and he liked to think. Though he would never ask, maybe she smiled too. The fish tank arrived on a Saturday, not because Daniel had fully agreed to it, but because Lily had presented a 12-point argument on Thursday evening that included a hand-drawn chart of fish tank maintenance responsibilities, a printed cost breakdown from a pet store website, and the closing statement that having something to take care of teaches empathy. Dad and empathy is a life skill. He had sat across from her at the kitchen table and looked at this 8-year-old person making her case with the focused intensity of someone arguing before a jury, and he had said against every practical instinct he owned, yes. Raymond helped him carry the tank up the stairs, because Raymond had appointed himself involved in Daniel's life improvements, whether Daniel requested it or not. It's a 30-gallon, Raymond said on the second landing, breathing harder than he would admit. She wanted 50, Daniel said. Lord, Raymond shifted his grip. She's going to run a company someday. I know, Daniel said. I'm terrified. They got the tank onto the stand. Lily had already assembled. She had assembled it herself with instructions on Wednesday without asking for help, and it was completely level, which Daniel had checked twice, and Raymond stood back and looked at it, and then looked at Daniel with the expression he wore when he was about to say something that mattered. You look different, Raymond said. I carried a tank up 2 flights of stairs. Not that kind of different. Raymond folded his arms. You look like you're here. You know what I mean. Like you're actually in the room you're standing in. Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked at the empty tank at the stand Lily had built at the blue and green friendship bracelet still on his wrist, slightly frayed now from 2 months of daily wear. Yeah, he said. I think I am. Raymond nodded once with the satisfaction of a man whose patience has been vindicated. He declined coffee, said his knee was talking to him, and left with the particular dignity of someone who knows they've said exactly enough. Lily came home from the pet store with Raymond's wife Patricia, who had taken her to choose the fish as Daniel's thank you to Patricia for the blind date that had in its complicated and unexpected way changed the entire shape of his life. Lily walked in carrying a bag with 2 fish in it, and the expression of someone transporting the most important cargo in the history of the world. I got a betta and 2 tetras, she announced. The betta's name is Admiral. The tetras don't have names yet. I'm observing their personalities first. That's very scientific, Daniel said. It's responsible, she corrected, and went to introduce Admiral to his new home. Patricia stood in the doorway and looked at Daniel the way women who have known you through hard years look at you when they can see the hard years lifting. She's something else, Patricia said, meaning Lily. She is. Daniel agreed. Patricia smiled. Evelyn called me. He looked at her. What did she say? She said thank you. Patricia tilted her head slightly. She said she hadn't thanked me properly, and she wanted to correct that. A pause. Daniel, that woman. I know, he said. She's not easy. I want to be honest with you. She has edges. She doesn't warm up fast. She's been alone a long time, and she built a whole fortress around that. I know fortresses, Daniel said. Patricia laughed the real kind surprised out of her. Yeah, she said. I guess you do. She touched his arm briefly on her way out. Don't let it take another 6 years, okay? Life doesn't give that many second chances. He thought about that after she left, standing in the kitchen listening to Lily in the living room, narrating to Admiral about his new environment in the calm, authoritative voice she used with animals and adults she was trying to reassure. He picked up his phone. He had been texting Evelyn for 3 weeks, not constantly, not in the breathless way of people in the beginning of something, but steadily with the particular rhythm of 2 careful people who are testing the weight of a bridge before they cross it. They had had 2 more dinners. The second one had lasted 3 hours and covered ground that neither of them had planned to cover her divorce 7 years ago from a man who had wanted a version of her that she couldn't sustain. His years after Claire, the specific texture of grief that nobody tells you about the way it isn't always sadness, but sometimes just the constant low-grade shock of making decisions alone, when you used to make them with someone. She had listened to that without trying to fix it, which was the right thing to do, and which not everyone understood. He had listened to her talk about the divorce without offering judgment, which she had visibly not expected, and which had shifted something between them that the rest of the dinner quietly built on. He typed, "The fish arrived. Lily named the betta Admiral. 3 minutes. A betta named Admiral. She has excellent instincts. She observed the Tetra's personalities before naming them. Responsible and methodical. I like her already." He stood with that for a moment. Then he typed what he had been thinking about for 2 days. "She's been asking about you. Not in the way kids ask. She doesn't do anything in the way kids ask. She asked specifically whether you were someone I was going to keep knowing." A longer pause this time. Long enough that he put the phone down and checked on Lily and got a glass of water and came back. "What did you tell her?" he typed. "I told her I thought so. She said good. She said she had questions for you about corporate governance." The response was almost immediate this time, and it was the most unexpected thing Evelyn Hart had ever sent him. "I'm available for questions about corporate governance." He laughed. Out loud alone in his kitchen, a real laugh, not the managed kind he produced for social situations, but the involuntary kind that comes from being genuinely caught off guard by something good. He couldn't remember the last time that had happened. The formal correction came through on a Wednesday morning, documented and official. A letter from the legal firm managing Meridian's archived records addressed to Daniel Reeves, confirming that the incident report for the Callaway breach had been amended to accurately reflect technical attribution. His name was in it. His specific contributions were described: the patch architecture, the containment protocol, the 72-hour response that had stopped a breach from becoming a catastrophe. All of it finally in writing with his name attached. He sat in his car in the Hartwell parking garage and read it twice. He had thought he would feel more. He had expected something larger: triumph, or release, or the specific satisfaction of a debt being paid. What he actually felt was quieter than any of those things. It was the feeling of a sentence that has been grammatically wrong for so long that you forgot what it was supposed to say, and then someone corrects it, and it just reads right, and the rightness is not dramatic, it is simply accurate, and accuracy, after a long time of wrongness, is its own profound relief. He thought about Claire. He thought about the hospital chair. He thought about the promise he had made. "I won't let them keep it." And he thought that wherever she was, in whatever form she existed after the body that had held her, she could hear him say, "I kept it. It took 11 years, and a woman I was hiding from in my own building, but I kept it." He pressed the back of his hand against his mouth for a moment. Then he folded the letter, put it in his jacket pocket, and went to work. He was on the 14th floor when Evelyn called, not texted called, which she had never done before, and his stomach moved in a way he was getting less embarrassed about. "You got the letter," she said. "How did you know?" "Gerald told me it was sent yesterday. I did the math." "Yes," he said. "I got it." A pause. Then, in a voice that was slightly different from her usual register, not softer exactly, but less armored. "Are you all right?" He thought about the car, about Claire, about the particular quiet of a sentence finally reading right. "Yeah," he said. "I'm all right. More than." He leaned against the wall of the 14th floor corridor in the light that now worked perfectly, no delay. "Evelyn, what happened to Pulse?" "He resigned from the subsidiary board 12 days ago," she said. "Officially for personal reasons. The people who needed to know the real reasons know them." A pause. "He won't hold a board position at any firm with connections to Hartwell. That's not a formal sanction. It's just how networks work when the right people understand what someone actually did." "That's enough," Daniel said. "That's more than enough." "I know," she said. "I thought you'd say that. He was quiet for a moment. Down the corridor, the elevator opened Marcus with a supply cart, who waved and kept moving. "I want to tell you something," Daniel said. "All right." "When I saw you step off that elevator on my first morning when I ran, I wasn't just scared of being recognized." He stopped, started again. "I was scared because seeing you meant the past was real, that it had actually happened, that I had actually been that person, the engineer, the husband, the man who built things that mattered, and that I had lost all of it. And if you could see me then, maybe I had to see me too. The whole version. Not just the maintenance worker, not just Lily's dad, the whole thing." The line was quiet. "And now," Evelyn asked. "Now I think," he said slowly, "that I spent 6 years treating my own history like it was something to be ashamed of, like hiding it was the same as being safe. But my history is also Claire. It's also the work I did. It's also the fact that I kept my daughter fed and warm and loved while my whole world was falling apart. That's not something to hide. That's something to stand in." He heard her exhale just slightly, just enough. "Yes," she said quietly. "It is." "I'm done hiding it," he said. "I don't know what that looks like yet, practically speaking. I don't know if I go back to that kind of work, or if I build something different, or what any of this looks like in a year, but I'm done apologizing for what I survived." "Good," she said, and the single word carried more weight than a paragraph would have. A beat. Then she said, "Daniel, the dinner Thursday." "Yeah. Lily is out of school Friday." He understood what she was asking carefully in the way she asked things that mattered to her. "You want to meet her?" "Only if you think it's right," she said immediately. "Only if there's no pressure. I understand what it means. I'm not asking lightly." He thought about Lily with her 12-point argument and her hand-drawn charts, and her fish named Admiral, and her questions about corporate governance. He thought about what Raymond had said: a woman who does what she did deserves the real version. "Come to dinner here," he said. "Thursday. I'll cook. Fair warning, Lily will interrogate you." A pause. Then, "I'm not afraid of 8-year-olds. You haven't met this one." The sound that came through the phone then was something he had not heard from Evelyn Hart before, a real laugh, full and unguarded. Nothing calculated in it, just a woman surprised into genuine amusement, and it moved through him like the first warm day after a very long winter. "Thursday," she said. "Thursday," he confirmed. Thursday came the way the best evenings come, ordinary in its arrival, extraordinary in what it held. Daniel cooked the way Claire had taught him, because Claire had been the cook in their marriage, and had spent 3 years patiently transferring knowledge to a man who had initially believed cooking was just following directions, and had learned that it was actually about paying attention. He made roasted chicken. He made the good mashed potatoes, not the fast ones. He set the table with the placemats Lily had chosen years ago, blue with small white stars, and he put 3 glasses out and then stood back and looked at the table for a moment. 3 glasses. He could not remember the last time there had been 3 glasses on this table that weren't for a holiday. Lily had dressed deliberately, not formally, but with the careful consideration she brought to situations she had decided were important. She was wearing the blue sweater she saved for school picture day, and her hair was in 2 braids she had done herself, and when the knock came at the door, she was at the kitchen counter reviewing what appeared to be an actual list of topics she intended to cover. "Are those questions?" Daniel asked, looking at the notepad. "Conversation starters," Lily said. "It's polite to be prepared." He opened the door. Evelyn Hart stood in the hallway in dark jeans and a soft gray sweater. Her hair down, no portfolio, no armor. Just a woman at a door with a bottle of sparkling cider, because she had apparently texted Patricia to ask what Lily liked, and Patricia had told her. She held it the way you hold something you weren't sure about bringing, but brought anyway. She looked at him. He looked at her. And in that doorway, in the ordinary light of a Thursday evening, something that had been building across corridors and elevators and restaurant booths and late-night texts quietly, completely arrived. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she said. From the kitchen, Lily's voice arrived with the confidence of someone who has been waiting for her entrance. "You can come in. I'm Lily. I have questions." Evelyn looked past Daniel toward the kitchen. Something moved across her face, not quite a smile yet, but the full intention of one. "I heard," she said and walked in. Dinner lasted 2.5 hours. Lily asked Evelyn 7 questions, including what she thought about deep-sea fish, whether she had ever made a decision she regretted, and with the directness of someone who has not yet learned that some questions are supposed to stay internal, whether she was going to be a regular person in their life or just a sometimes person. Evelyn answered every question. She did not deflect, did not simplify, did not talk to Lily the way adults talk to children when they are performing interest rather than feeling it. She talked to her straight, and Lily received this with the satisfaction of someone whose standards have been met. When Lily went to feed Admiral after dinner, Evelyn and Daniel stood at the kitchen counter with decaf coffee and the comfortable silence of 2 people who have moved past the need to fill every moment. She asked if I had regrets. Evelyn said quietly, "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't be." She looked into her cup. I told her yes, that I did. She asked what they were, and I told her one of them was waiting too long to correct something important. She paused. She said that sounded like something her dad would say. Daniel looked at the counter, at the bracelet on his wrist, blue and green frayed at the edges still there. "She's going to be extraordinary," Evelyn said. "She already is," he said. From the living room, Lily's voice floated back. "Admiral is adjusting well. The tetras are still unnamed. I'm thinking Wednesday and Thursday." "After the days," Daniel called. "They seem like Wednesday and Thursday kind of fish," Lily said with complete authority. Evelyn set her coffee cup down. She turned slightly toward him. In the kitchen light, she looked not younger, not softer, but present in a way he was learning was particular to her, the way she arrived fully in whatever room she was in when she decided to. "Daniel," she said. "Yeah." "I'm glad you didn't run the second time." He thought about the booth. The blue shirt, Lily's bracelet on the bathroom counter. The 5 words that had sent him back into a room he had been avoiding for 11 years. "I almost did," he said honestly. "I know," she said. "I could see it." "What made you think I wouldn't?" She looked at him. "The bracelet," she said simply. "You were wearing it. A man who wears what his daughter made for him into a room he's afraid of, that man doesn't run. Not really. Not when it matters." He didn't have an answer for that. He didn't think one was needed. Lily came back into the kitchen, announced that Wednesday and Thursday were settling in nicely, asked if Evelyn wanted to see Admiral up close, and led her to the living room without waiting for confirmation, because the invitation had been rhetorical. Daniel stood alone in the kitchen for a moment, in his apartment, in his life, in the evening he had built from the ground up with nothing but love for a small person, and the stubborn refusal to let the worst things that had ever happened to him be the final word. He could hear Lily explaining Admiral's personality to Evelyn with great seriousness. He could hear Evelyn asking questions, real questions, not polite ones, and Lily's voice rising with the pleasure of being genuinely engaged. He picked up his coffee. He stood in his kitchen. He listened to the sound of his apartment holding more life than it had in 6 years. He had spent 6 years believing the story of his life was finished, that the good chapters were behind him, and what remained was the responsible management of the aftermath. He had been so certain of it that he had built his whole existence around protecting what was left rather than reaching for what could still be. He had been wrong. The story had not been finished. It had been waiting for a correction for a Thursday evening for a woman who signed notes with her initials and answered a child's hard questions, straight for a bracelet on a wrist that kept him in rooms he needed to stay in. Daniel Reeves set down his coffee, walked to the living room doorway, and stood there looking at his daughter and the woman who had found him when he had spent 2 years making sure nobody could, and he understood quietly, completely, without drama, that this was not the end of something. This was the first night of the rest of his actual life, and this time he was not going to hide from it.